The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has held hours of talks with Israel ahead of a visit tomorrow by the US President Joe Biden, a trip designed to show US solidarity but also to try to prevent the conflict from engulfing the region. Joining us this morning is Mark Regev, who is senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is also the former Israeli ambassador to the UK. Mark Regev, thank you so much for your time, for joining us here on Bloomberg Radio. I just want to start with the latest details that we have from the Associated Press, saying that Israeli air forces have struck southern Gaza, where Israel has ordered Palestinians or encouraged Palestinians to try to seek refuge. Can you confirm that? And what happens to those Palestinians who are trying to move south?
So, of course, we target Hamas. We want to destroy Hamas's military machine and dismantle its political structure in Gaza. That's our goal. And at the same time, in parallel, we want to do what can be done to safeguard the life of the innocent civilian population of the Gaza Strip. So it's quite possible we are targeting Hamas facilities in the south, but we're doing so in a way that we are making every effort possible not to see any collateral damage. In every war, unfortunately, in recent history, civilians have been caught up and there have been civilian casualties. We know that, but as a democratic country that abides by the rules of war, we are making a maximum effort to target the Hamas terrorists and safeguard civilians. And that's why we've asked people to vacate the north, where we know there will be very complex and vicious fighting. We want them out of harm's way. We don't want them caught up in the crossfire between us and Hamas.
Okay, and so you've called for them to move to the south. That's been controversial in itself, and we've seen UN and other agencies
I don't think it's controversial.
Well,
as long as Hamas is active in the south, we will strike Hamas. That's part of our policy.
What I should say is many aid groups have suggested that it was going to be very challenging, and they've used more extreme words than that, to move people to the south. But having moved to the south, many people in Gaza might have thought that they would be safe, but you're suggesting that they are not safe from becoming, as you described, collateral damage in the south.
So I'd stress, we've asked them to leave the north because that's where we know there is there is terrible fighting ahead of us. We're going to send in ground forces quite possibly, and they will face house-to-house fighting. Hamas is built in there in the north, especially in Gaza City, where they have their military infrastructure under civilian neighborhoods, their tunnels, their bunkers, their command and control, their arms depots, their rocket launchers. That's all there, and we have to destroy that. And that's why we've asked civilians to vacate. In the south, if there are specific Hamas targets that need to be targeted, we will target them. Hamas cannot have immunity anywhere, not in Gaza, not outside Gaza. But we are not targeting civilians in the south, and it's much safer for them to be in the south than in the north. Can I guarantee to you that no civilian will be hurt in southern Gaza? I'd like to be able to, but unfortunately the realities of modern war make that impossible. But I can guarantee that we will make a maximum effort to avoid that happening. At the same time, you should know that Hamas has a deliberate policy of keeping people in harm's way. When we asked people to evacuate future combat zones,
why not allow the Rafah Crossing to open into Egypt? There seems to be all sides blaming each other for that border not being allowed to open. Is there going to be any change? Some view that there would be a period of time when the Rafah Crossing would be open, and that's happened in several days in a row. Is that going to happen now?
Well, it was supposed to happen yesterday. We worked with relevant international partners to make it happen yesterday, and we expected yesterday already. There was supposed to be an exit of foreign nationals. Unfortunately, Hamas prevented that from happening. They closed their side of the crossing. And this is another example of Hamas doesn't give a hoot about innocent civilian life, not Israeli life, and in this case, not Palestinian.
Will it be attempted again today? Will you be attempting to open the Rafah Crossing again today?
Of course, we are working with foreign governments to facilitate the exit of civilians through the Rafah Crossing. And your questions, it should have happened yesterday. Hamas prevented it from happening. They're holding some 200 Israelis hostage inside Gaza. They are using Gaza's Palestinian civilians as a human shield for their war machine. And now, as of yesterday, they started using the foreign nationals also as hostages, refusing to allow them to leave. That's the truth.
Ambassador Regev, according to your public comments, you've been present in meetings recently between Antony Blinken and Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister. What is Netanyahu and his war cabinet thinking now about pursuing Hamas? Does Israel need President Biden's approval, support? How would you characterize that?
First of all, we're very thankful and appreciative of American support. And American support has been in diplomacy, in their moral clarity, in the way they've described Hamas as an ISIS organization. On the Sunday night, President Biden even made a comparison with the Nazis. And he's correct, because the attack by Hamas, the massacre of October 7th, was the greatest single act of anti-Semitic violence since 1945. Since the terrible years of the Holocaust. And so we're thankful for that verbal support, for that diplomatic support, but also they've given us material support. They are helping replenish our stockpiles of weaponry. And they've, of course, moved their 2 aircraft carrier groups to the Eastern Mediterranean. And I think that's a deterrence to other dangerous actors in the region, not to think that this is a time to attack Israel. That I think they've been playing a very positive role. And when the president here is arriving tomorrow in Israel, we will welcome him as a friend, as an ally, and we look forward to rolling out the red carpet.
When you talk about foreign nationals, in the UK, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, talked about 10 missing UK nationals. Are you saying that foreign nationals are being held hostage in Gaza now also, if they're not being allowed to cross the Rafah Crossing into Egypt? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that yesterday people were supposed to leave and Hamas prevented them from doing so. Their exit was coordinated with Israel, with the relevant foreign governments, and Hamas prevented that from happening. I can say that for a fact. How does one explain that? What words would you use? I would say that's using foreign nationals as hostages as well.
What does a long and costly war mean to you? Israel's Defense Secretary Yoav Gallant saying and telling the US Secretary of State Blinken that Israeli forces are preparing for a long and costly war. How long? What does that mean?
I think it's important to understand that this is not another round of Israel-Hamas fighting. You know, since Hamas took over the Gaza Strip 16 years ago, we've had numerous rounds of fighting where they shot rockets into Israel and we responded and so forth. That's no longer the case. This is war. What they did on October 7th, their massacre of our people, 1,300 Israeli deaths and about 200 people held hostage in Gaza. This ISIS-type behavior, these atrocities, the status quo that was before October 7th is unsustainable. Israelis will not stand for it anymore. We are acting now to change the political realities in the Gaza Strip. And when this is over, there will be a different reality there. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us.
Okay.
And though we didn't start it, we will finish it. And when we finish it, we will do so on our terms.
So what is the mood then, if you have been in those meetings between Benjamin Netanyahu and Antony Blinken, and you're expecting the US president now tomorrow, the German chancellor also today, what is the mood in those meetings now, 10 days after the Hamas attack?
So first of all, we're receiving amazing solidarity from friends and allies in North America and in Europe, and Israel is appreciative of that support. And I think there's a determination in Israel to win this. We have no choice. We have to win and win decisively, and we will win. And we might pay a price. As our defense minister said, this could take time. And many young Israeli soldiers who are going into battle might not come home. I myself have a daughter who's a reserve officer, and she was called up and she's in the south. And like hundreds and thousands of Israeli parents, I, of course, am concerned. But when speaking to my daughter, they are determined to fight to protect their country from these brutal killers. We all saw what they did in the massacre of October 7th. We know what they're capable of. This is a threat that no people on this planet should have to live with, and we are eliminating the threat.
Can I ask you, you referenced October 7th and, of course, and the loss of life and the tactics used and the indiscriminate nature of the killing clearly coming as a huge shock to Israel and around the world. But now we're in a situation where more Palestinians have died since then in Gaza. I wonder what that means in Israel.
So, of course, we don't want to see civilian casualties. And we're making an effort, as I said a moment ago, to keep those as low as is humanly
possible. Are you making
possible.
enough effort, though? Because you say the West supports you, and there's been plenty of calls for support, but also calls for restraint.
So we will act within the rules of war, the recognized international rules of war. I'd remind you, if I can use a historic example, when Milosevic was committing war crimes against the people of Kosovo, there was a bombing campaign by NATO against Belgrade. It was a just campaign. It was a struggle to save lives. Innocent Serbs were killed. Now, that's a sad fact of war. We don't want to see it. We will act to minimize it. But if you say to me, and I'm not saying you're saying it, but maybe other people are, if you say to me that because there will be civilian casualties, Israel is not entitled to defend itself, to protect itself from this horrific terrorist group who ISIS-type behavior was on display for everyone to see. That's not serious. Israel has the right to defend ourselves, and we will do so within the framework of international law and the international rules of armed conflict.
Yes, international law and the rules of international armed conflict, but you say that you will end this on your terms. What are your terms? What does victory look like? What does Gaza, what does Israel look like if you want to end this conflict on your own terms, as you say?
So we will destroy Hamas's military capabilities, and we will dismantle its political structure inside the Gaza Strip.
And what is left of any cities and towns in Gaza at the end of that?
Well, obviously, the Hamas targets will be destroyed, but we are not targeting Gaza's civilian population, I repeat. But if I can use a comparison, I mean, the American president and European leaders have made a comparison with ISIS, yes? When the coalition, the international coalition, defeated ISIS, ISIS had a few cities. There was destruction there too. Sometimes when you are fighting a brutal enemy, that enemy implants itself in a civilian population. We don't want to hurt civilians. Mm-hmm. But in many ways, that is inevitable. We will make a maximum effort to keep that number to a minimum. But once again, we can't allow Hamas to have immunity. We can't allow them to successfully use Gaza's civilian population as a human shield for their terror machine.
Anthony Blinken has said that Israel has agreed a plan with the US to enable humanitarian aid to reach civilians in Gaza. I wonder if you have any more details of how that can be done, what that means for water, for medical supplies and the rest.
We're working very closely with the Americans on that. We had extensive meetings yesterday with the secretary.
How soon can we expect those supplies to be allowed in? Because we've seen the pictures of the trucks waiting.
From our point of view, we want humanitarian relief for the people of Gaza, but there are questions that need to be answered. Anthony Blinken said specifically that we have to be able to, and I'm quoting by memory, but he talked about to make sure that these supplies reach the civilian population of Gaza. And why does that need to be said? Because Hamas are the only people on the ground inside the Gaza Strip with weapons. And they have the ability to hijack supplies. They have the ability to take it away from the civilian population. They have done so in the past.
So does that mean you can't send in any? So you won't send in?
No,
is it possible to send in aid then before you are on the ground, before Israel is on the ground?
We believe it's possible, but we have to find safeguards in the mechanisms we use. We don't want fuel for Hamas rockets. We want fuel for generators in hospitals. And I think that's something that all the donors in the international community who want to send aid, they have to be assured that the aid is reaching the people of Gaza and not Hamas's terrorist machine.
Can an escalation be prevented with Hezbollah in Lebanon? Netanyahu has warned not to test Israel in the north. That testing does seem to be taking place.
Yes, and it's a worrying situation. We have no interest in an escalation in the north. We have no interest in a two-front war. But Hezbollah is Hamas's twin. They are both terrorist groups. The Arab League calls Hezbollah a terrorist group. And they, because they're in the Iranian orbit, they could well see this as a moment of opportunity to attack Israel. And it's dangerous. But I will say the following. One, Hezbollah won't take us by surprise like Hamas did. We are on guard, we are looking, and we are ready. If they force a war upon us, we will respond forcibly and decisively. And unfortunately for Lebanon, because Hezbollah obviously controls the ground, the Lebanese government is largely irrelevant. They have no power to restrain Hezbollah. But I have to be clear, such a conflict, we will hit Hezbollah hard, and Lebanon, unfortunately, in the process will also face a terrible price.
Can I ask you about the wider geopolitics at play here? Before the dreadful events of October 7th, there were talks between Israel and the Saudis about coming to a new understanding, new relationships. Has all of that process come to an end? Is there room for any of those talks to continue?
I think yes. Obviously, while the fighting's going on, that is a touch more difficult. But if we succeed, and I believe we will, in decisively defeating Hamas, that's a blow against the enemies of peace. That's a blow against the extremists. That's a blow against the Iranian coalition. That's a blow against terrorism. And that, I think, can create space for more moderate voices. We're speaking to Arab governments. They have no love for Hamas. They have no affection for Hamas. They know exactly who Hamas is. And I think they would like to see a different reality in Gaza too. They are, of course, concerned, like many others, about Palestinian civilian life. We are doing much more. And it's actually, I think it's interesting because Israel is perceived as being the enemy of the Palestinians, and Hamas is the defender, yes, of the Palestinians, but it's rubbish. We are doing more to safeguard Palestinian life in this conflict than Hamas is, which is using the civilians as a human shield, and which is actually preventing them from evacuating areas where we know there's going to be terrible combat. They, in Israel and in democratic countries, our armed services, our armed forces are used to protect the civilians. In Gaza, Hamas flips it. They use the civilians to protect the military.
Mark Regev, thank you so much for your time this morning on Bloomberg Radio. Senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also formerly Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom.